Hello, everybody. My name is John Kamin, and I'm here with Eric Hunter from the law offices of Bradford and Barthel. And we're here to discuss the topic of artificial intelligence and topics such as ChatGPT in the form of workers' compensation law. Eric, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Thanks so much, John. So Eric Hunter, I'm a global futurist with Innovation Futures. It's a subsidiary of Bradford and Barthel, and it's focusing on industry agnostic trends, future trends. And a big topic among that is, of course, the generative AI, artificial intelligence. And we tend to look at just where things are going. And we look at a variety of industries, but of course, legal is a huge one of them. And there's a lot of things happening there today.
Thank you, Eric. And my name is John Kamin, and I'm an equity partner at the Woodland Hills office of Bradford and Barthel. I'm also director of the editorial board. And Eric, as we take a look at this intersection between AI and chatbots as to where it meets workers' compensation law, and which is always evolving on its own technology side, what type of technology are we talking about in particular when we talk about AI?
Right now, the main focus is on generative AI. So it's something that's been, it's really hit a whole lot of press come December. And when OpenAI, backed very much by Microsoft and their investment into it a few years back, came out with this type of technology that's caught a lot of people's attention, in particular where it could pass multi-state bars, pass medical exams. Information could be fed into it, and information could come out that was much more on target and accurate than ever has been possible before. And what's interesting about this is that Microsoft, at least in the visual public side, beat Google to the punch as far as this particular type of AI, whereas this is usually something that's been within Google's consumer wheelhouse. And so it was interesting. And again, whether true or not, Google had the perception of being put on its heels by this a little bit, and has of course had to come out with their response publicly, which is barred. And there are other players behind the scenes with it, but really before we get into that, that's essentially what we're talking about now. And of course, ChatGPT, it has its different iterations. ChatGPT 4 just came out very recently, which again has been speculated that was part of Microsoft's marketing plan with this as far as coming out with it through OpenAI in December. Now Microsoft's in a position to roll out ChatGPT 4 and generative AI through all of its Office products, cloud products, and of course, Google would need to answer and is doing so through its cloud products. So that means that both as businesses and as consumers, we're now going to be interacting with this type of generative AI in one way or another.
So do you mean that when I accidentally attached a Google teacher chatbot to our local attorney chat, I was actually incorporating Google's own AI bot?
So Google's AI Bard, that's going to be coming in through some of the different iterations, whether it be Gmail or Chat or Meet, and Docs, essentially Meeting, where Microsoft's rolling out ChatGPT 4 through its Microsoft Teams, for example, and Word and Mail, and basically the tools everybody uses every day. And one of the prime iterations for it, to your point, would be, let's say you're involved in the chat or a video meet like this. And let's say, for example, using Microsoft Teams within the organization. Well, those that are using Microsoft Teams, they're going to be able to have the option to have this type of generative AI become a part of the meeting. And so it becomes up to the organizations involved to decide, how do we end up deploying that to our advantage? That's just one use case example, but there's a lot that people are thinking through.
And you kind of touched on it earlier, but who are the general players, and are the developers different than the people who are backing these efforts to create more AI? In other words, are the developers different than the investors?
It's a great question. And so to start with, as far as ChatGPT 4, again, you've got OpenAI, which is this open concept, right? As far as artificial intelligence goes. But then when Microsoft comes in, billion-dollar investment into it a few years back, it really ended up giving a strategic push into this concept of AI, but then also itself as a beneficiary that would come out of it. So a natural competitor of Microsoft is Google. And Google, of course, has been deploying their own version of AI within their products for years. But what we're talking about with generative AI, it's a different step up from what the general public has been used to, and frankly, those in the workforce. It's rather astonishing to be able to see the type of output come that we've seen as far as being able to pass those multi-state bars that I mentioned, and the fact that ChatGPT 4 is even better at it than the version that was released publicly back at the end of last year. So with that being said, that doesn't just happen by developers doing what they do as far as the creation. It's the incredible amount of money that comes into this type of investment that ensures that now that it actually has this level of this bar that's set, so to speak, of output, that therefore there's going to be the developers, there's going to be the managers behind it, there's going to be the business streams that are organized towards it, there's going to be the marketing behind it. Basically, the entire output between Google and Microsoft now, just as two examples, are competing in this meeting. But of course, you have others, of course, in social media, there's Facebook, that are going to be having their own iteration, already have their own iteration, same with Amazon. But it's interesting when you're talking about things like technology, like AI, it's similar to talking about military secrets, which is they're the worst secrets in the world. Sooner or later, the opposing side of one military is going to take in and assimilate and come up with their own version of whatever's being worked on. Same thing here. So what we're really seeing out of the gate here is this is what's catching everybody's attention. ChatGPT 4, these type of elements. But these other players that are investing this money and ensuring this competition with these ready-to-make cloud rollout product systems that all our organizations use and we as consumers use, it's really ready to go, and it's kind of interesting to see what's going to happen.
Absolutely. Yeah, certainly. And, some of the areas that I've been thinking about where it could be incorporated into the workers' compensation system are maybe simpler PD ratings, some of the computational aspects of a workers' comp, also aggregating data from whole databases of medical reports. That might be another area that some of our clients might be interested in. Another idea which came to mind is that maybe it could also be used to detect regulatory changes and highlight the more important ones. For example, a few years ago, a bunch of regulations simply changed numbers in the code, and no one had the correct code anymore. And it would take someone hours and hours and hours time to figure all that out and aggregate that and learn the new code numbers. Whereas I feel like an AI bot could do that in just a few seconds and have that at your fingertips. So when you think of the magic words pertaining to that one code section, you could just tell it that, and it would tell you the new code number for that. But one other area that came to mind, and in workers' compensation law, I've noticed this over the years, there are some practitioners who innocently, accidentally do the wrong thing for years and years and years. Sometimes it's a misinterpretation of case law, which the WCAB eventually corrects with the MBank decision, for example, saying that this practice is right, this other practice is not right, or it's flawed, and here's what you should be doing. So with the thought that people are teaching AI by interacting with these chatbots and helping it think and reason, is it possible that people in the legal fields could be teaching AI wrong legal standards or maybe not the best practices, and which would then be reinforced by AI?
Absolutely. The AI is as good as the data going into it. And that's actually something that helps it perform extremely well or not. And so it's interesting in that some of the other iterations that the task that's been put to, a part of the training that OpenAI put, their first iteration, or the iteration rather, released to the public end of 2022, it had been training for some time in data from all kinds of different industries and consumer-fed data. And so, but then when you start getting into the specifics of passing multi-state bars, these kind of aspects, then of course it's going to be around, it's really going to be a little bit easier to put it through a tried and true test of this is the standard that we're holding you to. We're holding you to the same standards that humans have to pass. Where are you passing ChatGPT and also ChatGPT 4, and how far are you going? And so when it comes to some of these other elements, yeah, the AI is going to essentially have to train. But the interesting thing about the ChatGPT 4 is, and the reputation it's developed, is how fast it can train in some of these iterations. And the goal, of course, being what is the error rate of the humans involved that we're working with, and what can it do to come up and meet those? And then also an aspect to it is, rather than looking to replace some of the workers involved, rather than looking to be something that should be feared, the other idea is, how can it be a working part of the team? How can you take something like this that can augment the practice of law and augment client service? And it's a really interesting aspect, I think, to artificial intelligence in the field of law that I think is going to be something that we'll see happening down the road, because attorneys absolutely could definitely, certainly use help when it comes to some of this research and development as far as their area of practice. And so being able to augment what they do in that area of practice, I think that's the highest bar that one could look for in this type of element. But of course, there is, of course, the business practices, streamlining, automation, these type of elements. There's managing partners all across the globe that are really trying to think of, how in the world does this impact our practice area, and how can we best deliver client service around it? And then on the client side, it's also interesting. And then how does this shift how we interact with outside counsel? And then how does this affect the data that we share together? So these are all questions that are being asked. And the interesting thing is, it's essentially leveled the playing field in a way, as far as nobody really has the answer yet. It's one of those creative mediums where it's up to the organization to try to find that best strategic path forward and apply it.
I think you touch on a good point. Using it as a assistant or helper definitely has its pros and its cons. I think one of the pros is that, let's just use trial testimony, for example. If I'm at a trial and I'm listening to opposing counsel question the witness, with each question, a chatbot or AI bot could be giving me all 20 objections each time of the 20 different ways I could object to that question, or maybe even the 5 I think are most appropriate. But if I were to object to every single question, and this is where we still need humans, we still need lawyers, is knowing which objection to select. And while AI may have a lean toward that, it may not know or understand that if we object to too many questions, the judge and opposing counsel are going to be furious with us. And so then, even though we may be technically correct under the letter of the law by objecting to a minor technicality in the question, which the AI might suggest, that's where the nuance of the human comes in, and knows that if I raise that objection to a rather innocent question that would have no bearing, I'm just going to get a nasty look from the judge, and they're probably going to lean against us now. So I think that's a good example of where the nuance comes in. Is sure, that list of 20 objections to the question may come up, but really the experienced attorney is going to know which one of those objections is going to be most effective and why, and the pros and cons of each of those. And I think that's one of the an example of one of the many calculations us humans go through as we're trying to decide, should I do this, should I do that, in the grand decision tree, which is workers' comp. And I guess where I'm going with that is, when I first started at Work Comp Central, and I didn't know anything about workers' comp, and I hadn't been to law school yet, I would go to the lunchroom and see the late great Dave DiPaolo's huge workers' compensation flow chart on the wall, which is a big chart, bigger than my desk here, and it's got 200 plus little boxes, and it is simply a decision tree of workers' comp. And as I was touching on with the objections earlier, knowing the subtext and the nuance of each of those little boxes is much different than having the whole decision tree memorized and knowing which route the case is going to go. So with that being said, what are some of the immediate things in the future that people who are either working in the industry or running small or to medium or even large firms should be keeping an eye out as we roll into the future with AI?
I think you touched on some great key aspects of that, John, that it comes down to the humans involved at the end of the day. You'll have your, you have the attorneys, and the attorneys, of course, have relationship with the other attorneys, and it's the team that's involved. It's the team that's trusted to work in this particular area of law. that's also, when going through litigation and the court system, it's the relationships that are formed and knowing the nuances in those relationships that are formed that are also key. That's why I think it's important to look at AI as a part of the team and augmenting that process. And I think that firms that best understand how to utilize AI as a part of the team that can best augment what the attorney is going to be providing in client service is going to be a really key element of success for that firm. And also how to assist through the litigation process, how to ensure that that ends up being delivered in the best manner possible. Again, that's going to be left up to the attorney teams, but properly using this can certainly end up helping that. And it's interesting, again, that it's so widespread. It's going to be involved within outside counsel, in-house counsel. It's going to be involved within law firms, professional services firms, clients. And so it's a very interesting element that, again, is so much as far as a key peace of mind right now. And so looking forward, one thing I would say would be, rather than trying to think about where this goes 3, 5, 10 years from now, it's more of just understanding, well, this is going to be rolling out first through the aforementioned Microsoft and its partners, ChatGPT 4, which of course almost all companies have. And a number of other companies will use Google services and they'll use Google business applications. Mentioning those two because that's where you start to see some of these iterations coming forward, and that gives the opportunity for your organizations to be able to look at and test, where does this fit in? And then there's the technology partners that firms currently work with and clients currently work with that will partner with Microsoft, Google, and others as far as saying, well, we've been partners a long time. We deliver products specific to law and technology, and now we know that we need to be delivering this type of AI, this generative AI, into the services that we provide. And that's part of what I meant by leveling that playing field, is that now there's a whole lot of choice for firms to look to when it comes towards their technology choices over the next 3 to 5 years. And one of the bars firms can set and clients can set is, well, what's your strategy around generative AI? What's your strategy around ChatGPT 4? Where again, we can look at what it can do now and its limitations now, but how can we all try to help it become more successful in what it is we're trying to do? Those are key things I'm thinking that folks should look at. And then also understanding, as far as that level of capital investment involved, I can't stress enough, you look at a year like 2022, where due to movements in the economy and the Fed raising interest rates, you end up seeing a lot of capital outflow. And we just saw this recently, whereas as of this recording, we're in March and we just looked at a couple bank failures up in Silicon Valley. And so you start looking at these type of aspects where there was a whole lot of tech innovation funding going in there. So there's a bit of hesitancy now from capital investment to go into different areas of technology. I should say more hesitance than there was before, let's say in 2021. But where a ton of money is pouring in is into this technology, into generative AI. The amount of investment going into OpenAI, Microsoft's new investment, and the competitors to Microsoft and Google, where this is going, it's extraordinary, the billions that are being put into it. So that alone, I think, should also have firms and both on the law practicing side and client side really think hard around, well, if that much money is going into this, and it's already ready for rollout and rolling out, and the stakes are not just within Office products for these two companies, Microsoft and Google, but also Google's key area search, which Microsoft is trying to challenge now. These are things that we should take seriously because this is going to affect what we do in our practice areas. So it's best to form a strategy about it now.
Okay. And yeah, that definitely makes sense. Keep an eye out on, what vendors are offering to various law firms, and also keep an open mind when it comes to investing in this technology. That certainly makes sense that it could help level the playing field as far as what's available to law firms out there as well. Okay, well, with that being said, Eric, thank you for your time. Let's wrap it up for today. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate your time today.
Thanks, John. Thank you, everyone.